Maybe the clock is moving, so I'm going to keep this introduction a little bit brief. Nope, I'm going to say more than Cathy. I'm going to say this. Everyone who knows Cathy knows that her heart is bigger than that V that's right up there. She's our spiritual leader, our guide, our fence post. She's everything for here. Please, Cathy Huff.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Asana. Thank you, Bonnie. Oh. I'm so sorry to have to begin my talk with some sad news, but I do need to announce for those of you who don't know already that our friend Daniel Huber made his transition around a week ago. Those of you who knew Daniel will remember him as a kind and humble soul who often shared his wisdom and his humor in his creative thoughts with us. Daniel was a loving, compassionate, and patient caregiver for many months for Dale Dinsmore, who said to me, "He treated me like a queen." We'll never know what precipitating event or what deep pain surfaced that led Daniel, a recovering alcoholic, to relapse and be hospitalized for several days last month. And we prayed for his safety and his recovery when he was out there on his own. And as sad as we must feel by having to let him go, we know that he is now both safe and recovered. Daniel was missed when he wasn't seen at the center for several weeks, and several people asked me about him, and we were protecting his anonymity at the time and didn't share a lot. We know his presence will continue to be missed, but we are grateful that his soul has returned to love with a capital L, and he's now experiencing complete peace. Daniel's sons, Sean and Ryan, will arrive later this week, and they've invited his friends to attend his graveside service, which will be next Saturday at 10 a.m. at Alai Cemetery. So I know some of you will be coming to Shelley's workshop, which is also next Saturday. And if you cannot be there, just think about Daniel, say a prayer for him, and honor him in your own way. And thank you very much. The second thing I want to do is to apologize for my failure to ensure that we took some time to honor one of my spiritual heroes, Dr. Martin Luther King, last Sunday. It slipped through the cracks. And now more than ever, I feel that it's important to call to mind those leaders who were and are ambassadors of peace and nonviolence. Dr. King reminded us that love transforms with the redemptive power. And earlier this week, I was very kindly reminded of my oversight by our own Dr. Libby. So I want to offer her a few minutes to very briefly share her personal reflections about Dr. King. Come on forward. She looks all beautiful in pink today.
Aloha mai kākou. I'm going to start when I was 3 years old, and I'm going to zoom right through until I was 22. So I was standing on the toilet in the bathroom looking out the window. My mother comes in and says, "Elizabeth, get down. It's nighttime." I'm looking across the canyon and across the boulevard and up on the hill. There's a cross, and it's on fire. And all these people dressed in white with funny hats. They scared me. There was something wrong. I didn't know about evil yet. So I said, Mom, what is this? And she says, well, it's just what some people do when they don't like what the other people are doing. And so somehow or another, for the rest of my youth, I was always looking at what might be cruel or unfair to individuals. And when I got to college, I was studying to be a student teacher. And there was a whole lot of events in between and very dear people in my life. And so I started student teaching at Pacoima Elementary School. She taught there once. And our population there was 45% Chicano, 45% Black American, and the rest, we weren't sure. We were also the poorest and largest elementary school in Los Angeles Unified. This school was in the San Fernando Valley. Well, I loved it. I loved the children. Well, you see, I was real little, and they were all bigger than me, because I was working in the 5th grade then. But that was okay. They weren't so mean to me because I was little. They took care of me. And then I was hired there. And I taught 6th grade. Our kids, when it rained, couldn't get across the highway because their shoes would fall apart. I wanted to reach the kids academically, but I knew that it had to be done in a loving, interesting way. And so with some exploration, I came upon 2 things. One is kids need to be part of the decision making. They need to be treated respectfully. They need to have a chance to be different. And I found out that there was this guy, Martin Luther King, and he kept doing all these things to try to bring people together and to bring peace. And so I saw that he brought them together in loving ways and let's work together ways. And so I was going to call them my babies, but I guess I was their baby. That's what we did. And I went to the families, every single family, and I asked, what would you like for us to do? And I asked the child, and we made a contract between the 3 of us. And every day I gave envelopes of, oh, you did this really well, tell Mom. And when we wrote names on the board, it was because it was something they did right. And so the bottom line as the years went by, and I was there for 9 years, my kids weren't bad. My kids weren't rude. My kids educated me. And I want you to know that the level in my classroom was from preschool to 8th grade in their competence, averaging at the 3rd grade. And so we made it work for everybody, and we treated them respectfully. And the last thing to say is there was this little guy in the room, and his brother had been in my room, and he said, he's going to be in your class next semester, and he can't talk. We made a pact, and when I spoke to him finally in the classroom and asked him a question, the kids said, no, he doesn't talk to people. And he said yes to what I had asked. And the kids. So Martin Luther King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. I know I'm a little long.
How lucky those kids were to have you, Dr. Libby. All right. This poem originates from traditional Vedic teachings. When you know beyond any doubting that a single life force flows through everything and that you are this life, then you will love all beings naturally and effortlessly. And when you realize the depth and fullness of love for your own self, you will know that every living being and the entire universe is included in your care. You are not in the body is in you. Our monthly theme for January is Getting Grounded or Back to Basics of the Science of Mind teaching, and our topic today is What the Mystics Taught. So this poem encapsulates what the mystics have taught, so I'll just go sit down. And this topic reminds us all of the golden thread of truth that runs through all philosophies and all religions when you get down to the basic core. So how do we define mysticism? Simply, mysticism is the realization of oneness with all that is, which is what we teach. When we study the teachings of the mystics, we find profound similarities in their experiences. They might come from different parts of the world, they might come from different cultures, different religions, different time periods, but their message all points to the same universal truth, that we are all one with the one. The great mystics have seen through the veil of matter and perceived the spiritual universe in which we all live. In his textbook, our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, tells us, a mystic is not a mysterious person, but is one who has a deep inner sense of life and their unity with the whole. And he further writes, a mystic is one who intuitively perceives the truth and who, without conscious mental process, arrives at a spiritual realization. The mystics included, as we all know, great prophets, the inspired writers, musicians, and the illuminated souls of all ages. All the mystics have recognized the absolute unity in man. In moments of deepest realization, the great mystics have all sensed that life flows through all, and that all are some part of that life. Now, Dr. Holmes, in this chapter 20 of the textbook, which is titled What the Mystics Taught, he named several mystics that had influenced him. He was a great reader and a scholar. And of course, he put Jesus as number one and named some other biblical prophets and mentioned other examples such as the Buddha, Plato, Homer, Socrates, Plotinus, Emerson, Whitman, Browning, all the poets, Tennyson, Wordsworth. And he also in this chapter told the story, I just like this, of a simple cobbler named Jacob Boehme, who, as Dr. Holmes said, while pegging away at his shoes, looked up and saw in a nearby geranium plant the reflection of the cosmos, or the very soul of God. The commonality of all mystical experiences involves illumination, or being filled with all-encompassing light. Dr. Holmes wrote, the mystics did not contend or argue with people. There was nothing to argue about. They just saw, and they knew. They are the great revealers to man of the nature of the universe and the relationship of man to God. So by this definition, Dr. Holmes himself was a mystic. He really was. And he wrote a poem called The Song of the Creator, which I just found hidden away in the archives, Science of Mind archives, and it blew me away. He said, "From sorrow, pain, disaster, the truth alone can set men free. The self-knowing, known, and knower are ever one with changeless me," meaning God. "It is I, the truth incarnate, life of everlasting day, who's supreme in every soul, to each the truth, the light, the way. Those who see me as the all, uncut by separate desire, find light and flame of single life is lit by one eternal fire. All signs are holy things to me when faith and love with them conspire to bring each seeker of the way and to light my celestial fire. All paths of worship lead to me. All shrines to me alone belong. The hymns of praise throughout the ages are part of my celestial song. I am the beginning and the end, all that is one vast whole. I am the Father and the Son, I am the sown. Smaller than the smallest atom, larger than the greatest sea, the moving force in each and all, the pageant and the pageantry. I am the source, the cause, the all, darkness of earth, light of star, radiance of the sun and moon. I am here, there, close and far. All beings have their root in me, my soul, the primal cause of all, the flowering of the seed of life, eternal spring, eternal fall. I am the seed, the root, the branch, the earth, the moon, the sun, the air. I am present, past, and future. I am here, there, and everywhere. And he wrote that before the Beatles did. Though formless is my hidden life, I am the form of what is made. I am the way, the truth, the life, the substance, shadow, light, and shade. I, the eternal word made flesh, am both namer and the name, the creator and what's created, the fire, the ashes, and the flame. Splendor of light supernal, knower and known, wisdom of wise, giver, receiver, and keeper, heaven, hell, doom, and paradise. Flame of uncaught, caught in heaven, seed of what is born on earth, action, reaction, time, and timeless, infant, aged, death, and birth. Hidden within all forms evolved, in silence, beauty, wisdom, will, is that which makes the cycle move, unmoved, immovable, and still. Go Ernest. This is what the mystics knew and taught. They knew, first and foremost, that there is a living presence indwelling in all, that this power is transcendent, triumphant, absolute, and positive, that that which is infinite cannot be divided against itself. And it is that power, that whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. That all manifestation of life is from an invisible to a visible plane through a silent, effortless process of spiritual realization that occurs when we unify with pure spirit. That is why unification is the second step of our spiritual mind treatment. First, we recognize what God is, and then we unify with it. And then we go on to claim what we want to claim. That we know that the mystics knew that within this infinite mind, each individual exists, not as separated, but as a separate entity. We're all a point in universal consciousness. Each of us is an individualized center of God consciousness, not separated, but separate. That we awaken to the divinity that is latent within us when we consciously court the presence of spirit and arrive at the realization that we are one with the body in the physical world and we're one with the creative law of the universe in the mental world, and we're one with the Spirit of God in the conscious world. The mystics knew that cosmic consciousness was not a mystery. It was merely the self-knowingness of God through man, and that illumination will come as we more and more realize our unity with the whole, and we constantly endeavor to let the truth operate through us and as us. Another poem from Rumi, the 13th century Turkish poet and mystic. This poem is called Say I Am You. I am dust particles in the sunlight. I am the round sun. To the bits of dust, I say stay. To the sun, keep moving. I am morning mist and the breathing of evening. I am wind in the top of a grove and surf on the cliff. Mast, rudder, helmsman, keel. I am also the coral reef they flounder upon. I am a tree with a trained parrot in its branches, silence, thought, and voice. The music coming through a flute, a spark of a stone, a flickering in metal, both candle and the moth crazy around it, rose and the nightingale lost in its fragrance. I am all orders of being, the circling galaxy, the evolutionary intelligence, the lift, and the falling away. What is and what isn't, you who know, you, the one and all, say who I am. Say I am you. Mystical experiences can occur and probably have occurred for many of you in each of our lives in the most spontaneous and memorable ways. Courting the presence of God in our spiritual practice and remaining open and aware to this divine energy within all things, including, of course, ourselves, opens us up to the possibility of being everyday mystics. In his book, God is a Verb, Kabbalah and the Practical Practice of Mystical Judaism, Rabbi David Cooper writes, we can learn about mysticism or we can practice being mystics. But I don't think it's an either-or proposition. Learning about the mystics offers us a pathway to discover the mystical life for ourselves, and science of mind and spirit is known as a philosophy and a faith, a way of life, and it's also a practice. So we're encouraged to have a daily spiritual practice in which we can court the presence of God, because this increases our awareness of the infinite wisdom that is everywhere present and opens us to deeper discoveries about who we are as spiritual beings having a human experience. This practice is personal to each of us. We don't have dogma, we don't have liturgy. We just know there's this direct contact that we can all establish through our own personal spiritual practice. And learning about the great mystical teachers is just one way to discover the depths of our own spiritual path. So we might want to read some of the words of great mystical teachers, such as Jesus, or the poetry of Rumi, or the musings of St. Teresa of Avila, Meister Eckhart, Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was a teacher of Ernest Holmes, Thomas Merton, Joel Goldsmith, Ernest Holmes, just to name a few. All of them can show us the way to a deeper understanding of the mystical experience. Following our own spiritual practice builds our own conscious awareness of the presence of the One. And it's not always in complicated rituals or activities that we find the presence. More often, we find it within ourselves, in the quiet of our own awareness. Amit Goswami writes in The Self-Aware Universe, if ordinary people really knew that consciousness and not matter is the link that connects us with each other and the world, then their views about war and peace, the environment, pollution, social justice, religious values, and all other human endeavors would change radically. It's through the opening of our eyes and our ears and our minds and our hearts that we encounter the divine mystery. It's in the most unexpected moments that we experience the presence. So I'm encouraging you and urging you, as I always do, to take some time each day to just be still. Be still and know. Look within your own being. Discover the truth of who you really are. Thomas More wrote in, this is a long title, A Religion of One's Own, A Guide to Creating a Personal Spirituality in a Secular World. He said, I'm painfully aware that experts in the fields of religion and spirituality sometimes feel that bringing mysticism down so far into ordinary life is an insult to the great mystics and makes it too light and too breezy. I feel just the opposite, he says. I believe that one day we'll understand that we've lost out on religion because we made it too lofty and too distant. I see it as a simple quality of everyday life, and in its simplicity lies its beauty and its importance. Now, some of you, hopefully all of you, remember D.H. Lawrence. You know, he's the one that wrote that scandalous book, Lady Chatterley's Lover, the one that I snuck off my mother's nightstand and read in secret many years ago. Well, it seems as he also was a mystic and had a very spiritual side, because I came across this poem of his, the last poem, and it's called Pax, P-A-X, Peace. He says, all that matters is to be at one with the living God, to be a creature in the house of God of life, like a cat asleep on a chair, at peace, in peace. And at one with the master of the house and with the mistress, at home in the house of the living, sleeping on the hearth and yawning before the fire, sleeping on the hearth of the living world, yawning at home before the fire of life, feeling the presence of the living God like a great reassurance, a deep calm in the heart, a presence as of a master sitting at the board in his own and greater being in the house of life. So as I said before, the title to this poem is Pax, or Peace, Latin for peace, and that's appropriate because January 30th marks the beginning of the Season for Nonviolence, which was founded in 1998 by Arun Gandhi, who's the grandson of the Mahatma Gandhi. So it is a period of 64 days that begins on January 30th, which was the date that Gandhi was assassinated, and it ends on April 4th, which is the date that Dr. King was assassinated. Yeah. So for those of you who wish to participate in the Season for Nonviolence, I made copies of a sheet that gives you everyday practical things to just focus on in your spiritual practice throughout this 64-day period. For instance, January 30th, courage. Eleanor Roosevelt urged, you must do things that you think you cannot do. Light a candle and accept the courage to practice living in peace. Very simple. Just brings our mind, brings our focus back to how we can establish peace within. And that's where it all begins, right? Just like the song says, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. So I have a box of these. I will put them on the back table by the door, our welcome table, if you'd like to take one that has something for you to do, think about, focus on, or maybe write about every day of the 64 days for the Season for Nonviolence. I hope you'll all join me in focusing on peace. And so it is. Thank you.